from the. So I think this is really going to be interesting. I'm just going to start with by sharing a quick joke that Sunil made while we were talking before letting all the participants in. Sunil said that we ourselves aren't exactly unicorns, so I don't know in what capacity we are really advising people on how to sell and market. But that's where really this gets interesting. That I think it's just sharing of experiences. I don't think anyone here is sitting on a very high pedestal and trying to preach from any point of, we know more. It's more of sharing experiences. And I think that's exactly what it is. So feel free to ask questions. And in the end, if you have any counter views, counterpoints, I think you're more than welcome to make those too. So I'm going to actually start with a question that I found really very interesting. For one, because in the sales and marketing world, there's a lot of confusion between sales and marketing. So a lot of people don't really understand the difference between sales and marketing. And sometimes they feel they're synonyms. Sometimes the clarity is not as much as it should be. And in that sense, I was quite intrigued to see this question, which is marketing important? So here was a question which was really very different. It's not what is marketing, what do we need to do? Someone saying, is marketing important? And this question comes from someone who only has a sales team. They don't have anyone working on their marketing for now. And that's where probably they are coming from. So is marketing important? And is there a matrix that can be used to understand how much do you exactly spend on marketing and on sales as a percentage of your turnover? So there's a question and a sub question. So I'm going to start with you, Sudhin, because I know you're very, very aggressive when it comes to sales. Sudhin has a very structured sales team. So if you can just give us your quick thoughts on, is marketing important?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And just to add to Sandeep, before I answer this question, as an association, we are looking at growing the pond rather than worrying who will fish from, our pond. Right. So that's why this whole idea of sharing our knowledge, whatever little bit we can share. To the question, yes, I think marketing is very, very important. In fact, absolutely unavoidable, especially in the given age that we are living in. We are all digital, social, everything is online. So marketing becomes that much more, important part of, I think, the sales. But yes, to answer, to delve a bit more, it's become much more closely integrated. It's no more two separate departments, marketing and sales. It's become much more integrated and much more, I think, almost seamlessly, intertwined with each other. So now, to answer how much should be the cost that one should look at marketing and sales, I'm talking about myself. I take as an industry average, which is about 10 to 12%. And I'm combining both. And if you look at pure play marketing, I think there should be about anything between 3 to 5%. But that's something that it's all varies from industry that you are servicing in terms of what is your focus industry and which stage of maturity you are in, that particular organization is. So maybe in the earlier stage, you might have to do a bit more than normal. And if you are maybe higher up in the maturity of your organization, then you can probably scale it down a bit. So I'm sharing my 2 bits on it. Thank you, Sandeep.
So if you consider sales as, something that gets you quick results, as in I can just go to 5 people and ask them, do you need translations? Do you need translations? Instead of building this whole funnel where I have to, invest a little bit in marketing. And it's in that sense, a long-term kind of objective. would it be fair to say for someone who's really starting out, probably doesn't have too much of a budget for that? Do you think, and I'm going to come to you, Biraj, do you think marketing is optional for such people? Can they just simply reach out to more, organically try to grow their client base and then focus on marketing once they uh, have a certain amount of budget for that? Secondly, and then you probably can chip in, Vidushi, because I also wanted an angle, because I think one of the objectives of marketing is awareness, creating awareness. And if you kind of look at a typical translation company, people are already aware that companies do require translations, and there are companies who provide translations. Now, you come from a completely different background, so to say, where there's a lot of technology involved. So there could be a lot of lack of awareness which hinders. Maybe you can just chip in and give us your 2 cents on how does it work for technology companies. Biraj.
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. And I think Sudhinji already mentioned that there are quite a lot of factors and variations in the decision making. That is actually true, because if you are in the initial part of your entrepreneurship, so as to say, or you are more mature, depending on what your turnover is, these can be very different questions and can apply very different to specific companies. So, Sandeep, what I think is, and from my experience, and it's different for different companies, like we just said, from my experience, what we have tried to do is initially spend a little bit more effort, time, and getting the sales team organized and correct. Because the thing about marketing is, the simplest way I explain is, marketing people are the people who spend, and the sales people are the people who get in the money. I mean, it's very crude way of saying it, but that's the way I categorize it. And so, I would say, whether it's social media marketing, it's just television marketing, advertising, whatever you want to say, marketing ultimately will help you get in some leads automatically, even while you are asleep. In general, that's the principle I follow. So if your sales team is not structured, and there's nobody to take care of the queries and respond to them within a quick time or within the required time, then there's no point in spending that much amount in marketing, because you're simply not prepared to answer the questions to the client. So in my opinion, we've got to get all the sales material, the documentation, the answers, the FAQs. Even I would say, I've had situations where companies are struggling every single time to send a price or a quotation to the company, because they seem to be customizing it for every similar situation. And so, I think the sales part is much more priority and important to get it right before you make some money, and then you can decide what percentage you want to spend on marketing, because ultimately marketing is going to just take it to the next level in terms of getting your leads and increasing the sales. Sandeep, you are on mute.
Yeah, Vidushi, maybe how does it work for you? Because there's some amount of awareness that needs to be created about your service, your product.
I think the principle pretty much remains the same, in terms of marketing and sales. And especially if you're, really starting out now and you have a very small setup, your sales team is actually the first people who do the marketing. Because even if you're, how do you get your first customer? Your sales guy will get it, but he will have to market it in some way or the other. He will have to go speak to a client, tell them that what are the services I provide, why am I better than the next person, etc., and win that first customer. So he is doing marketing. Once you come to a stage where you want to separate the two, you have the the structure, the size, the scale, the funds, then yes, you can divide it into two. But otherwise we may not realize it, but even your first sales guy, which is usually the entrepreneur, is doing marketing on day one. How do you get the first customer?
Yeah. I just have one personal perspective here before I move on to the next question, which is for you, Sunil. In my personal opinion and experience, and this is something that when I look back, I realized that this happened. It really wasn't part of a plan. But before you start affording marketing, do not forget that you yourself are a brand. And uh, that is the biggest marketing tool that your company owns. And I say that because even today, without honestly doing anything at all. I personally generate at least 10 to 12 leads every month. And just people calling because they associate my name with either languages or translations. So those leads could even be sometimes what language should I learn, or anything to do with languages. So I think that personal brand building is also something that I would call an essential first step of marketing for anyone who currently can't afford to spare a budget for marketing. Coming to you, Sunil, and again, this almost is like a follow-up question, but an interesting one. How do you exactly measure the success of a marketing campaign? As in, is it just the obvious ones where you say that the traffic to our website increased, or maybe the number of inquiries increased, or are there any more parameters that come to your mind when you talk about the measure of success of a marketing campaign?
Thanks a lot, Sandeep. Happy Holi to all. I think in our case, again, for us also we realized the importance of marketing very late. As a technocrat, we always thought that just able to deliver something or knowing our technology or knowing our craft was enough. Log aise hi kaam denge, aisa we used to think. Then we thought that we should hire sales, and we hired sales, and then that was it. But now over the years, we have started realizing that marketing is really important, and it is basically kind of demand generation. In the marketing scope of things, we are not selling anything. It's just creating awareness, and there, at least in our case, we have tried to now create 3 areas or 3 kind of sections in it, each having their own objective. So one is just the traditional way of letting the world know about us. It's website, it's social media, it's better SEO, and something. So where we continuously we are saying, and there that team has some metrics, like how many blogs are getting updated, or how much the reach has increased, whatever. So that then there is a team where there is a lead gen area, again in a marketing, because ultimately the objective is how we can drive inbound leads and assist sales. Sales is, this cold calling is of course one part, sales guys reaching out, but that's mostly unqualified things. It's hardly 1% or 2% success that you get in all this. But if it's a qualified lead, where the customer has reached out to us saying that, "Arey boss, we have this need," then it's a better. So how to increase the level of qualified leads is one of the objective of this team, lead gen. And then third is the branding side of it. Now, marketing is what the company says. Yeah, we are good, our pav bhaji is good, or our translation is better, this, that. And branding is what your customers are saying about you, or what the market is talking about. So how to make our customers talk, be it one first customer, be it our vendor or partner. But if he says that, "Hey, these guys pay me on time," now that's a good brand for us to develop. Hey, Fidel is a company that pays on time. So I think for each of these, if you divide, and each stage of the company will have different needs. And there are tons of books and material on this, but if we can take small objectives, that what is my immediate objective for next 60 days, 100 days, or this year, and what we are trying to achieve, some of these metrics can be formed by self. Yeah. I hope it answers your thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And I'm going to give this one more angle and then ask Madhu to weigh in on this. She's just joined us. So welcome, Madhu. So there's this concept of a clutter break in advertising, where, there's a lot of clutter, and what do you really do to break the clutter? How will your ad stand out? That's of course in the advertising world. I'm trying to apply that to marketing. That if each one of us starts marketing with a lot of budgets of what X number of rupees, and everyone is doing pretty much the same thing, how do you really set yourself apart? How do you really tell your customers that you're different? And I just wanted your perspective on that, because there are traditional ways that you would market. Typically, if you see anyone's idea of marketing is put out a happy Holi post or a happy something post. So generally just be out there and say we are there. So unless you have created something stunning, it's just one more creative, one more design, one more video. How do you break that clutter? How do you, as in, and this is a question that probably can be answered across the board for smaller companies primarily, because I think a lot of questions have come from smaller companies. So freelancers, how do they market themselves at a minimal cost and break the clutter, stand out?
Thanks, Sandeep. Sorry, I'm a little late today. You posed a very interesting question of breaking the clutter, right? Everybody says, been there, done that. Did I get anything out of it? One thing I've realized is you have to do the basic stuff, everything that Sunil spoke about. You have to do the basic stuff, and then you need to go one notch above. One thing I have seen work very well is dissemination of a knowledge base. When you're trying to sell, you're also trying to spread knowledge, right? It is not enough to just sell your brand. It is also very important to teach people out there that this is what are the best practices. This is what you can learn from the market. So while selling and marketing, if you're trying to give back, I think that has an extra edge to it. It's very important to give back to the people who are buying from you. A lot of times we say that we are the trusted partners of our clients, right? Why are we the trusted partners? Because they come to us as industry specialists, and we need to make sure that when we are going out there, the outreach has to be more informative about what is in the market, what are the best practices, what can you do better, or what are the similar case studies in the market, rather than I am selling you this. So don't try to oversell. It will be an overkill always. Try to give back. Another thing I've noticed is it may not be direct marketing, but being part of such webinars, being part of such industry events is also very indirectly marketing your stuff. When you're out there joining events like CITLoB, be it our other partners, right? EU-ATC, Gala, now even Women in Localization, we are putting ourselves there in the forefront for people to recognize us. And when we start contributing in those webinars, even by simply asking relevant questions, right, we are marketing ourselves. So I would say those are important things. Give back in the form of, say, use cases or case studies or what has worked well for you and what a client can take from you rather than selling yourself. And two, participate in industry events, because that itself is huge visibility.
I completely agree with this last point of yours, and I actually have experienced this. In the year 2000, I attended a ATC conference, and I was probably the most neglected person around. Someone from India was not even a novelty back then. So basically people were talking and something happened, and I just asked a question and everyone turned. It probably was for my accent, which was not British. And that's how I got noticed. So I guess from there on to making so many friends outside in the events, contributing in whichever way. I have, in fact, all of these are very interesting questions since we have not formed them. They've actually come from people and they want to know, your views about that. So the next question is actually a very simple one, so to say, but seemingly very difficult also at times. How do you find the right point of contact within a company? And is it different for different industries? And if so, how do you guess, as in who do you contact, as in be it LinkedIn, cold calling, wherever? So again, I'm going to come back to you, Sudhin, if you can just give your experience.
So I think that's a very, I think like you said, it's a very simple question. And I think that's a first step that everybody thinks, that who would need my services? And once you identify who would need your services, then it makes it easier. For example, if you are a freelance translator, who would need your service can be even the guy next door, because he might have his education certificate in, say, Marathi language, and then he wants to go to US and he wants that Marathi certificate to be translated into English, and so it can be as simple as figuring out who would probably need my services. Anybody who goes out needs his certificate translated in whatever language it is required. So typically that means, you know, an HR manager would in a company would probably be a good bet to really reach out and figure out. And then, I mean, if very obvious thing, the marketing heads, the product heads, you know, so the project managers. So there are multiple, I mean, and these industry designations change from for each industry. You have specific, so you may not have product manager in a services company, but you would have a project manager or a project coordinator who might be. So you need to really figure out which industry you're talking to and who would probably need your services in that industry. But it's very, very important to really figure out which is the industry segment that you want to achieve and who would need your service in that. Yeah, Sunil, I think you wanted to add, please.
Yeah, no, I'll just add to it. Basically, I think just adding on to it, sometimes the user or the person needing this service might not be the buyer of that service. So there, I think that one has to also see who has the budget, who will approve this, who is the buyer of my services in an organization. So this realization came to us or me very late. I used to chase some people, then to realize that, boss, this guy is not anyway going to sign. He just needs something, but again, the budget was going to be sanctioned from the other strategy department or product department or something like that. So identifying that also might be very important. Who is your buyer, actual buyer? Yeah.
Right. So there's another question, and probably this one is also from a smaller company. And I think it's important because if you look at the market mix today, at least in India, it's majority coming from freelancers, smaller companies. And I think thereby this question is very relevant if we really need to take everyone along and grow as an industry in India. So the question is, MNCs and larger companies prefer to work with more established LSPs. So what can smaller LSPs or startups do to ensure that they are also in contention? So I'm going to go to Biraj and Madhu for your views on this.
Yeah, Madhu, you go ahead first.
I thought it's alphabetical, Biraj and then Madhu, B and then Madhu. All right. It's a very good question, Sandeep. I've always enjoyed working with smaller LSPs. Let me tell you why. One, because some of them are single language vendors, and that is their USP. When a smaller LSP or a startup starts, right, they concentrate on a few languages where they know that their quality is going to be very good. That is their USP. Typically, larger LSPs say that we work for 100+ languages. It's very difficult for a person who's buying these services to gauge which of these languages will give them better quality. But smaller LSPs, be it selling Indic or only European languages or only Middle Eastern languages or only Southeast Asian languages, they have that niche, right, that they are selling. And you know that because they're trying to establish themselves in the market, they will provide you the best quality at the right price. They are not out there just to make the margin or just to make the money. They're there to establish yourself. So I would tell small LSPs that promote yourself as single language or a group of language vendor. Do not try to bid for everything when you're starting new, because that's not going to be easy. A lot of companies, right? A lot of big companies I know split their projects across multiple LSPs. And they go to LSPs that may be specializing in certain languages. I have seen that happen multiple amount of times when Arabic is a language that is there in the list of languages to be translated. They prefer to go to one agency that only does Arabic because they know there are nuances there. I've seen that even for Japanese, right? They will give the rest of the languages to one LSP, but for Japanese, they will specifically go to an agency in Japan. In India, since we also deal with foreign language to English translation, that's one way to go. Promote yourself or showcase yourself as single language vendors. Always talk about quality first before the price. See what is the value that you can add to the customer rather than what you can win from the customer. I think that will help in the long run. And then you can slowly start building your language competencies. And once you've gained that trust with one language, right, it's very easy to gain it with other languages.
Right. So, Biraj, I'm going to tweak the question slightly because there's also a sub-question.
Hi, Sandeep. I would like to add a different perspective to the conversation, if it is okay, if I'm not disturbing.
No, just probably at the end, you can just make notes. So once I'm through with all the questions, then once you open question and answers, you can just give your views on whatever aspect you want to. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Biraj, the question was also from the other side. Then Madhu covered one part, which is what do larger LSPs do and prefer. The question also was, how do actually freelancers and smaller companies get a foot in the door when it comes to larger organizations, as in the industry that's giving us work, all the big IT companies, big engineering companies, whatever, you know. So if they have this approach of preferring bigger companies, how do freelancers even get in? How do smaller companies get in? Do you have any ideas, any strategy that these companies could adopt?
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. I think it may not be directed to the right person at all, but in general, I can tell you that we've had this. When you talk about size, there are all kinds of sizes in the industry, right? We are also small compared to some of the international LSPs, and therefore we also face this problem. And frankly speaking, for some of the large companies, they have a mandate, right? That they, like in Hindi, we say, na, shadi barabari walo mein hoti hai. You marry in the similar this thing. And they follow that principle, right? I mean, in the sense that they will tend to go because their management has made a mandate that there should be a minimum turnover or whatever. There has to be a minimum. So you simply can't go there. And I think just adding to Sudhinji's point is that, you also have to know where you don't want to waste your time, right? I mean, you have limited energy as a small company, and therefore you have to be reasonably sure in what you are very good at. And there will always be certain companies, whether it is LSPs or enterprise customers. And we've had very good success going to enterprise customers, even within India, who were struggling to work with foreign languages simply because, and I'll tell you, it's a very small segment that we were experts in. We were experts in multimedia tools. And therefore we knew how to integrate different languages and voices on multimedia tools, presentations, and things like that. And we made a very small entry into, by just creating voice-based presentations and animated presentations. And back then, we had that specialty in recognizing that what font would work with which particular multimedia tool. And that was our specialty, which kept us different from any company, because any software or advertising company that they went to never knew how to work with languages on PowerPoint slides. Or back then we had something called Macromedia Flash, Director, and some of these multimedia tools, right? Including some of the DTP tools, which did not support Indian languages very well. So exactly what Madhu said, that if you know what is your strength and what is it that you can stand out with, then you can use that particular item. If you generally know what's the pain point the customer is struggling with, just go with that one single mindset, saying, I know that there may be 5 more companies who do the same, but I can do it better than them. And you should know what that better is. And if you can pitch that, it's not an easy thing to do, but you have to keep trying. Ultimately perseverance helps. Out of 10 companies you may hit and make a crack in one. So it's also a question of persevering with your confidence.
Interestingly, there's also a GST angle to this question, and no matter what you do, GST can't be far behind. So it seems that a lot of members have had issues with companies who don't work with them just because they don't have a GST number, which honestly is not mandatory below a certain turnover. So they're not wrong in not having one, but that seems to be a factor that's working against them. What do you suggest to such companies, what should they do? Sunil, if you have a view on that, and of course, Sudhin, who is the compliance man, according to me, because he has the most experience with all compliance authorities.
one of course, one of the my points is that ultimately when big companies or mid-sized companies are trying to outsource, ultimately you are looking for reliability, who will be able to give it back at the lowest price point and at a decent quality that I want. This is a generic requirement from any project manager who's working for a big or mid-sized company. There, as a new company, if you want to break that cycle, because people will try to give work to agencies that they have worked in past, ideally, because of preference and so on. I think even if it's a single person company, how we position ourselves. So few things that I want to, which work with us is, when we were even very small, we used to list our capital on our website, which is actually requirement in Japan. Typically. So what happens is the moment people see that we are a company and we have registered or we have a bank account. Now, if this person has a bank account in Japan, which means he has been verified, he's authenticated by some agency. So these guys are not fraud or suddenly, because as a foreigner, you are trying to establish, right? And so, or if you're saying freelancer, instead of even using word freelancer, I'm an independent consultant or I'm a one-person company. This again gives a different perspective and how you want to present yourself. So having some of these collaterals or getting organized yourself, instead of Gmail having a proper, maybe registering a domain and having a, so you're basically creating some authenticity here and ensuring that you'll be able to deliver. Lastly, can you hold up, say 45 days of payment terms or 60 days of payment terms or 30 days, or in between you give up and, hey, unless you pay me, I cannot give you the next page because I have to pay myself somebody else and so on. So companies also want to understand how much is your financial position and how do you, so there could be these things. And of course, GST and these days, the cost of non-compliance is getting more. So it's better to be compliant at a very basic level. And then there are a lot of opportunities that might come up. Yeah.
So, Sudhin, any thoughts on what smaller companies, especially smaller companies without a GST number, do you have any suggestions for them? What can they do? If I'm not wrong, even if it's not legally mandatory, you can still opt for a GST number. So I think that's something that can be done. It might increase your paperwork, it might increase some cost. But if that's what's holding you back, if that's where the deal is breaking, then I think depending on what you're losing, it's still an investment worth making. So any thoughts on that, Sudhin? The GST issue.
Yeah, so GST, so I think you're you're absolutely right. It's always better to take GST and, give him the input credits. So that's easier, easier and safer, because having GST, like Sunil said, is a proof that somebody has validated and you're serious about your business. You're serious about being in the industry. So if you're serious about, and people like to work with people who are serious in their profession, So having these registrations helps you to project that you're serious in your business and you are there for long term. You're not there for maybe a short period, and that's a fear that anybody would have when you're there working for you. But even if you don't want to register for GST, I think the only way to break this is your relationships. How well you establish your relationship with your client. And I mean, you may have the best product, best price, best quality, but unless that is supported by some, your page, your relationship, it's not really going to help you get the client and retain the client retain the client's business with you. So it's, I think, to really fight off GST angle, probably the only thing that you can use is your relationship with the client and how strongly you establish it. And then, of course, the client starts working with you much more on a grander scale than what he would with others. So that's the only trick here. I think that is what I can think about.
So I have one question for you, Vidushi, again. It's to do with machine translations. There's a specific question. How do you pitch for machine translation oriented projects? And the sub question, which also you can answer, is how do you really deal with the reservations as far as machine translations are concerned? So it's, I think, both sides. How do you get clients who don't mind machine translations? And at the same time, there are some who are not going to trust you just because you're claiming to use machine translations. So,
oh, I thought the problem was actually the opposite. Everyone's asking for machine translation because it's just so cheap.
yeah. So
But
yeah, the distinction we need to make here is when you talk about machine translations, if you're using Google Translate, then of course anyone else can do it. So I think using proprietary engines, or at least engines that you have invested in in some level, I would imagine that's the premise of the question.
well, it's actually when you are trying to say that, you should opt for machine translation versus manual, you have to, again, the question comes down to trust. You have to build the trust. You have to show that why, using a machine translation is not going to risk the quality or the end result. And how it is, let's say, the direct comparison always comes with Google. Why should we not use Google? Why should we use you? So you have to put in the effort to demonstrate that how you are better than Google. You of course have to give the story behind it as to how you have built it differently, but proof of pudding is in the eating. So you have to really give out examples, whether it is by doing some samples, setting up demos, and you have to give enough time for people to build that trust. Just saying that, okay, I've given you one demo, now make a decision, otherwise I'm going. That's not going to work. And obviously, when it comes to machine translation, the cost parameter obviously is extremely attractive. What also people do is they offer a support, saying that you can take machine translation, but wherever you feel that this is not working out, you take a manual backup for it. Like maybe get your 10% in manual and 90% in machine. So especially when there are large volume projects, no customer or very few customers in the world have the bandwidth to actually go whole hog and do manual translation. It's physically not possible. So it is not every project where machine translation will work. Only where the volumes are so high that manual translation becomes infeasible will a customer even consider looking at machine translation as a genuine option. And those are the places where you need to then demonstrate your capability. And of course you have to again make yourself stand out differently. That will be a theme across most of the questions, that what is your USP, and that every individual machine translation developer has to show that, okay, you can use Google, but Google will not give you A, B, C, D, E, I will. So as soon as you are able to define that USP and communicate that very well, a lot of conversations will become very different in any customer scenario.
True. I think we are going to run out of time, and I have one question which I actually want to end with, because it's such a typical question that I can't help ask it to each one of you. So it's the same question, and each one of you can give us your take on that topic, and then we can open up for question and answers. So the question is, since all Indian customers are focusing on getting the best quality at the lowest price, how do you convince your clients that quality comes at a price? So you can start in alphabetical order, if you please.
Okay, so alphabetically I come in first. So it's one of the most difficult questions, even though it's one of the most asked questions, one of the most difficult questions to answer. And I must admit that we have lost out on quite a few on those to most of the competitors, in the sense that, we as a company have had, from a policy point of view, we have a certain minimum benchmark and we don't go below certain. But we've also had some very good case studies where we continue to work with customers Because one of the other things that is addition to this question is, even if you get working to the client, there is also constant bombardment from your competitors at a lower price. Now, even retaining the customers at whatever price you have agreed with it, there is always somebody who is going to give it 10 paisa cheaper or 50 paisa cheaper, right? There is an art in even retaining the customer, and I'm quite proud to say that we've always had almost a near 100% customer retention over the last 15 years. And the reason for that, I can say that part we are very strong with is what we call as an account management system or whatever, and different people may call it differently. That we've made sure to distinguish within our company that as a policy, we want to have a very high level of focus, whether it is in production, quality control, or it is in the account management relationship building with the customer. We would say that, an existing customer is like, you can work with them for maybe next 5 years, 10 years. So the cost of continuing to work with a customer is far lower than acquiring a new customer, is how I believe, my experience shows, and it can be different for different people. And therefore, we tend to orient our internal company systems in such a way that we are highly focused on, existing customers. And I think the way to look at it is that from the top at my level to every single employee who's directly or indirectly involved in sending out any communication to the customer, it has to be a vision at the company level, and every single person in the company believes in that vision. And I think there is nothing more than that in terms of clearly communicating to the client why it pays to work with us in a continuous way. What are those values that you pass on to the customer? And it can be different for different companies. For some may say talk about quality, but we generally don't talk about quality, because what I feel is no company, the kind of customers we have, they will anyway not work with us if we don't give quality. So quality is like a given basic level for us. So we tend to talk something above quality. What is it that we are giving you? We are giving you an online project management system. You can log in at any point of time to see what is going on with your projects. You always have a direct view and intervention into the project. So we've tried to do different things, and every single year we try to do one new thing, introduce one new thing to the customer. Like, last year, I can give you an example. We gave a customer, we are not 24/7 as a company, right? So we have a few hours which we don't service our customers. But sometimes we have customers who are in certain time zone who need immediate pricing or something like that. So we figured out a way to say, look, here is the project management system. You can actually log in and you can go there and see the standard pricing and the agreed pricing both. And you don't need to come back to us every time and look at the details of the pricing. Okay, even after that you need certain clarification, certainly you can contact us and we will reply to them. But if you need it in a real hurry within like an hour, you can always log into the system, go into your profile and see the agreed price list or whatever, and then take the information from there. Now that's a lot of things which, if you give the power to the client, is what we feel works a lot better than keeping everything close to our heart and only giving it to the customer when they demand it.
I'll take up from where Biraj left. Power to the client.
Madhu?
Yeah, I'll just take up from where Biraj left. Power to the client. I think he ended it really well. In our industry, we say quality is relative. It depends on who's reading it. Sunil will agree with me, especially for Japanese, we've noticed. You give a good translation to 2 or 3 Japanese, right? 3 of them will give different reviews. One will say it's very good. One will say it's
never
average.
Happy about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're very different. So quality is relative. Whoever's reading it, they decide on quality, right? So for us, other than all the things that Biraj said, I think one thing that has worked for us in the past is doing POCs for customers. We give them different samples with different quality, right? We say, okay, you're doing sample 1. This is the quality. This is the price that it comes at. Sample 2, this is the price that comes at. Sample 3, this is the price. The first sample could be pure empty, like raw empty. Take a call. Maybe you just want to use it for internal purpose. That's the price it comes at. Second one could be empty plus post-editing. Or it could be just single translation, no proofreading, or a TP or a TEP. So give that option to the client to choose what they want, what works for them, and try to understand who is this translation targeted towards. If it is just for internal use, there is no point going and telling them do TEP, right? Translation, proofreading, editing. It's going to be of no use. If it's something that they're going to use to maybe build something else out of it, then you give them another option. So let your customer choose the quality and tell them the price it comes at, not at the end, but when you're submitting the samples. So for us in the past, sample processes have worked very well. Clients have appreciated that we have done that extra, right? I know a lot of freelancers will say LSPs come to us and ask for free samples. There's another mechanism we use. We work with the translators saying, okay, you're working with us for this sample. If this sample is approved, you will be paid for this when you're working on the project. So give them that extra. We also work with some translators who do multiple samples with us on a monthly basis, and they get that amount, right? So there has to be, from the translator's perspective also, you have to give something. So let your client choose, like Biraj said, power to the client, and they will make a choice.
Very well said, Madhu. And I think I'll just take it from my perspective. So yes, the price is always the the challenge for most of the Indian client. So what has worked for us is that we go down to some price that is agreeable to them and us. It may not be our preferred price. It may not even be like Virat said, they don't work below a certain margin. But we take a very dynamic call on that. We say, okay, we will work on this price for a certain period, maybe even for that particular project. And that gives us, like Madhu said, an opportunity to demonstrate our sample, our quality, our engagement with the client. And once that is established, probably we have that foot in the door, so to say, to really establish the relationship and take it to the next level, maybe to that works for them and works for us, including the margin that we are looking at. So that has worked for us in multiple occasions, just to get the clients to engage with us. And once the clients start engaging with you and seeing the kind of quality or value that you give, I mean, they at the end of the day, price is is always a subset to more important things like maybe quality, delivery, the relationship that the client has with you, and so many other things. So if that is established, automatically price becomes not that relevant. Of course, in the entry point, it is a relevant point, but not subsequently. And like Biraj actually said this, the most important thing is to retain the client. What is it that you do to retain the client? And I think that's a key point to really fight off this price struggle that you always have.
I just wanted to add something. I remembered while Sudhin was talking about the threshold price, we actually lost a project, and a client came back and said, the reason you lost it was that you bid way lower than everybody else. We thought there is something wrong, that you're bidding so much lower than somebody else. There is something unique that you will take away from the process. So you will not do quality, or you will not use a good translator. So be careful when you are in this price market, right? If you bid way low, there are smart customers who will definitely eliminate you from the process.
Absolutely. I've had multiple occasions like this. I mean, it's because you have, like, Sandeep said in the beginning, if you have too many structured marketing and sales, you kind of lose touch what is that. You only do a postmortem, and then you realize you lost a client because you're too low. And the perception in the client's mind is, of course, there that, if you're too low, then you probably will be missing out on some key element that is a very important requirement of the project. So we've absolutely, I echo with you, Madhu, there.
I just want to add one line, because we have time and most of the points are covered. I think especially in Indian context and in some customers, what we have seen is quality and security are the most misused words, or just to drive down the pricing, or just they'll try to create a. So many times we have seen that the customers also don't have an exact idea of what quality they want, or what do they mean by quality, as in. So, quality is linguistic quality. Many times it's a quality of communication, articulation problem, quality of delivery, and entire process, and so on. So there, sometimes, as most of you have already mentioned, it's a good way to define what do you mean by quality, or what your quality means when you are stating that this is X dollars or X rupees or whatever, and then try to work around that with the customers. Yeah.
Vidushi?
So I think a lot of most of the points have been said. I'll probably be summarizing them only, but definitely understanding the need, why, what you are reaching out for, what is the project you're bidding for, what does the customer want. Absolutely correctly pointed out. If they need it for something internal, they're probably not going to buy into a very elaborate process, which is more expensive, will probably take more time also because the need is not there. But let's say, largely in our case for process 9, when we are looking at localizing websites and apps, the key reason must always be reminded to the customer. You are doing this to reach out to new customers. You are doing this as a branding exercise. You are doing this to increase your market share. If you are not going to be putting out quality out there, you are not going to, you're doing yourself a disservice. Your customer is going to say that, instead of gaining 2 customers, you lose 4. And there are many examples available to us. I mean, I opened LinkedIn today, and at least every 4th or 5th post is about someone pasting a screenshot of some or the other app or website saying, look, what a terrible translation done. I will never buy from you. So take those examples and use them in the next business pitch where you're making to prove a point towards quality. That is this what you want? You're having a project, you're spending all this money to gain more customers. Is this what you want? And also show the positive side. There are brands, there are companies which are putting out very positive news towards localization, where they have adopted a high quality proper process, and that has really paid back to them in multiples. They have really increased their reach, their sales, everything. So one shouldn't be penny wise and pound foolish. That is something that needs to be drawn, and of course that will be largely driven by understanding the need. And always we have to provide whether it is options, whether it is market knowledge and understanding. If you are providing value without asking for anything in return, automatically the person speaking to you will trust you, because you're just giving something for free, and not just something trivial or frivolous, but giving something of value without really asking for anything in return. Even if you don't get that project, you will always be in their mind for any future opportunity. So you yourself becoming the brand is, this is one step to that. And then demonstrating your USP. Bottom line is that you have to find a USP, whether it is a niche in a language that you provide, or a niche in an industry or vertical that you provide. For example, I do legal translations very well. So if that is your niche, be that as it may, if it's using technology, providing platforms, or more visibility to the customer, or providing a technological solution to it that reduces time or reduces cost or increases efficiency, whatever it is, finding that USP. And then it's about continuous account management.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly give my take, because I have a slightly different take. I don't think there's a right price. I don't think there's a right quality. And I think people don't buy a service, they pay for a perceived value of the service. So I think if you're not getting the price that you want, it just merits some introspection on the kind of messaging that's going out in your value proposition. And I think that should eventually help people fix the pricing issue. As in, what we want is one thing, and what we get is probably what the clients value our service as. So there's no right price, there's no right quality. There's a market for bad quality, there's a market for great quality. There's a market for free translations, and there's a market for very, very costly translations too. So on that note, I'm just going to check if there are any unanswered questions, or if anyone wants to ask a question. We have just about time to take a couple of questions. So if anyone has questions, you can just put your hand up on the chat and feel free to ask. Okay, I think most of the questions in the chat have been answered. And I don't think there are any more questions from the audience. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining in. And I think it was really amazing because I think we just asked what people wanted to hear. And these were questions that came actually from everyone who participated today. And that was really something very different as far as this particular webinar was concerned. So thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you panelists, and of course Asawari as usual for putting everything together, and all the participants for joining in. Good night and thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.